I am back with my panels. I have all three of them tacked down, and as you can see, I did go ahead and cut the edges just a little bit. It comes over just a little bit. And so I was thinking about where I want to start, and I do tend to start with some kind of a stitch with movement, especially since I have all these loose edges to get down. So I was thinking I would do each panel in something different to start with, a feather stitch, a twig stitch, and maybe a fern stitch. But who knows, by the time I get the first one done, I might change my mind again. It has been known to happen. Let's see, I think I want that to be right side up. And I'm just going to do some feather stitch. And again, this is just kind of securing the lace a little bit more and just starting to add some interest. I decided a brown would be good here. And I'm not going to worry too much about my edges. If I don't get them completely stuck down this time, I'll get it the next time around. So the feather stitch is kind of a series of V's. So one thing you might notice when you're working on lace of different heights is it's kind of fiddly, at least at start, until you feel like everything's down. Once you get all those laces, so something you could do is you could go all the way around here and just do little running stitches across all the lace to get it all nice and flat. You could do like invisible tacking stitches, which just means coming up in and out with just very tiny stitches, like maybe with sewing thread. I tend to not worry about it once I know that they're not going to fall off. I can shake them like this and they're not going to fall off. I don't worry about it quite so much anymore. So it just means, just be aware. It might be a little bit fiddly when you're first getting started. I probably made this thread or yarn because it's a yarn. What I'm stitching with right now is a merino wool and silk thread. See how the stitches just sort of, they blend in, and that's what I want right now. I'm not worried about trying to make, well, I'm never worried about trying to make a design, am I? And this thread is variegated. There's a little bit of a purple in there, but it's mostly brown when I look at it, and it's just gorgeous and smooth. And because it's a slightly thicker thread yarn, I call it, if it's going through my needle, it's a thread to me. So no, I'm kind of excited about this little book. It's a little different from any that I've done before. You don't have to worry about a spine, which is kind of nice. We'll see if I'm still excited about it when I get the whole thing thrown together, but I think I will be. And I like working in panels like this. I've got another piece that I'm still working on in panels that's going to be then hung this way, and they're going to be attached to one another. There are a lot of fun things you can do if you just start with a base and get yourself a bunch of bases and don't worry about what you're going to do with them. Maybe you just want to make a whole bunch of lacy panels, or maybe you want to paint a bunch of fabric and just do, a bunch of squares with feather stitch on them, and then you'll have them to play with later. Yeah, don't do what Susan does, which is cut her thread too long, because it does give you more opportunities to get things caught up. And because this isn't really thick, I like it when I can do that. There's just something about the lacy background that just makes it really fun for me to stitch on. I'm going to turn this upside down and see. I should be able to go a little bit faster that way. Yeah, way too long a thread. Let's see if we can make it any better. That'll help a little bit. And I just like to go willy-nilly. Now, of course, you could go a couple across either direction, but it's entirely up to you. I don't try to make mine all the same length. I like the variety. So that's what I'm going to do on this panel, is just a whole bunch of feather stitch. Now let's grab another one. And on this panel, let's start the fern stitch, which is another favorite of mine, because of the movement that you can put in a piece. So I'm just going to come over here to an edge. You can start it anywhere. And my fern, I admire people that make very precise fern stitches where everything is the same length, but for me, that's not the case. They're always going to be different lengths because I do wonky stuff. Whoops. All right, so this is lovely to slide through, but you might want to make shorter thread lengths which just makes sense because this does have, mostly wool in it, and it's going to shred the thread. Ooh, shred the thread each time I pull it through. So it would have been smarter to make these shorter lengths. And actually, surprisingly, it threads through the needle very easily. So I didn't need to be, a lot of times I end up with long threads because it's such a pain to thread the needle, even with a threader. And sometimes if you're using a thicker thread, I don't know about you, I still have trouble getting it through the needle head. I'm working on a piece right now where with the backing and the painted fabric, it's so thick that even with a 22 needle, is that a 22? Yeah, I think, or is it an 18? Whatever. Even with a much bigger needle, this is a 24. So I think with an 18, which is bigger, it's really hard. I have to use my grippers to pull it through. Which means it's, it works, it's fine, everything's coming together beautifully, but it doesn't make it as much fun to stitch. This is really fun, and these are a nice small size, so if I just concentrate on these panels this weekend, I might be able to pull well, I'm working on the outside cover too, but I should be able to pull this together maybe before Christmas, which would be fun. All right, so the fern stitch is just, if you can do a straight stitch, you can do the fern stitch. And let's just start to curve this a little more. And this is a good one for trying to tack down all my little edges because I can curve it without too much difficulty. There we go. I love this stitch. All right, let's see the third panel. Just deciding which way is up. And again, with the way long, not quite as bad. This one's better. Okay, here's what I decided. I was going to do 3 different stitches, but the twig stitch with this thread was not an easy one to do, and it was going to be very frustrating for me to film and frustrating if anybody else tried to do the same thing. The twig stitch, which I will show you on this piece, but I will show you when I'm doing it with floss, it works much better if you have a smooth thread that you're pulling through. This one's just way too hairy. So what I decided I'm going to do is I will have feather, fern, and then feather, and then I'll go back and reverse things. So let's just get this one started with another feather stitch. And the reason I didn't leave it in to show you guys is I think that showing me struggling with that one was not going to teach anybody anything, so I will just tell you I was struggling with it mightily. It's not a stitch that I have down as an absolute in my repertoire, and for some reason, after going so nicely on the other 2 panels, this one's just going to give me fits, and that's okay. But I just, most of the time I leave all my goofs in when I can overcome them and go forward, but I just decided that it was not going to be a pleasurable experience for me to try and work a twig stitch all over this piece. So I changed directions. And when I bring in another type of thread, which is just, it's really fun to use different types of thread on your piece. So you get different textures as well, when you're petting it, because I'm not the only one that does that, right, that pets their projects. So yeah, feather stitch is kind of my go-to, makes it easy just to get things started. Sometimes just looking at the blank page, it's like, where do I start? If it's at all possible, I will start with a feather stitch. Some people like to start with a running stitch just to get some stitches down. This would be a great thread to use for a running stitch. Sometimes I'll just start making little clusters of French knots. But it's just to kind of get the ball rolling, just get things moving. And then that line of stitching will inform everything else. Okay, I'm just about coming to the end of my 3rd panel here. Been trying to think about how to approach working on this, how much of it to do on camera. I think just watching me do the same stitch over and over again, unless it's in a live stream, isn't nearly as exciting. So what I'll probably do is work on these a little bit more with the feather stitch and the fern stitch off camera. Trying to make a little turn. And then I'll come back with some smoother thread and do the twig stitch, which will be much easier with a different thread. This is kind of sticky with all the little hairy fibers, which is what makes it so soft, but sometimes not ideal. You know, match the needle to your thread and match the stitch as well. We don't think about that sometimes. At least I don't. You know what? I'm going to go down and start the turn. It's harder to make a turn when you're that close to the edge. So I'm just going to come over here and pretend like I'm starting anew. Since this is all going to be just random stitches, I don't have to follow a pattern or a line anywhere that I don't want to. That's the whole idea for me about doing freeform textile art or abstract embroidery or whatever you want to call it, art just because. You do it the ways you want to do it because that's the way that makes you happy. What did I do here? Did not leave enough for my V. And I went too far across in the same place. There we go. I swear my stitching looks so much different when I'm doing it off camera, but you know, some things just are easier to do when you don't think about people that are watching. And I don't think about the audience while I'm filming. I think it just subconsciously happens. It's not like I'm nervous in front of the public. I used to speak in public all the time, so it doesn't make me nervous. I think it's probably that I'm just not, whoops, going to split my thread there. I'm not feeling 100% confident about my stitching abilities. And that's fine. It is what it is, and I am what I am, as Popeye would say. Yeah, this is a nice size to work on because it will finish soon. So yeah, and I'll probably do some French knots off camera just because I do French knots all the time. You guys see me do those, but we'll see. I'll probably do some on camera too. Who knows? Who knows where the thread goes? Let's take a look at the beginnings of these guys here. So we've got panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3. It's a start. Now I can come back in maybe with some rust and maybe with some beige. This would probably be a good one to do the twig stitch with. Some other shades of brown, some darker brown, some lighter beige, you know, whatever we want to do. All right, thought I'd pop back in here and show you the twig stitch, a much easier version of it. I was using this wool silk combo, and it's too hairy to really pull through easily on this lace. It would work fine if I was working on linen. I did this batch with 6 strands of floss, and I would continue to do that, except I can't find where I buried the floss on my desk. So I've just got some Pearl Cotton 8, and it's basically starts off like a feather stitch. You're going to make your V. It's just because the lace has got all these different layers and more things to grab onto it, and you just want to hold on to that loop. Sorry, not that loop. This next loop you want to hold on to. You're going to then, you've got your V like you would have for a feather stitch, but instead of moving sideways, you're going to go to the top and make your little twig part. And then I like to let my thumb catch this because it reminds me not to let go of that thread. If you let go of that thread, you're going to have this thing's going to fly up. So you want to hold on to that thread because you're going to come back up here at the base of your V. And when you bring it up here, then you're going to wrap like a French knot. Just give it a wrap like that. And then it'll pull through, usually nice and easy. And then you've got your little twig. Now I'm going to go off to the other side like I was doing a feather stitch. And you can make these as long or as short as you like. You can come way up high if you want and make a really long twig. Just hold on to your loop when you come back down at the bottom. Much easier than when I was fighting with it the other way. Sometimes these lace backgrounds just make things a little more difficult, and sometimes they don't. But my thought is that everything is going to be so covered with stitch, it's all going to blend together and it's all going to be fine. But with showing somebody how to do something, you want to make it a little bit easier. And you want to not let go of the needle, right? Turn on the camera and fingers fumble. So there you have the twig stitch. And then let's look at the feather stitch right next to it. So see, it's just a little bit different. And again, you can come back just like you could with the feather stitch and add French knots on here. The only other thing I did is I added some colonial knots here just to experiment with it. So I've got some twig stitch here, and I've just got more feather stitch here, and my fern stitch here. So I'm going to play with these off camera and be back sometime to show you the progress.